Assalamualaikum guys, welcome back to our analysis of leverage funding in Islamic banking. So in general, we know well that whenever the bank uses deposit fund or leverage fund to make loans or to make murabaha, they are required to hold some capital against those assets. And the riskier the asset, the more capital the bank are required to hold, and therefore we see the role of banking capital in banking, which is to absorb any unexpected losses arising from the exposure. So any default that occur that may go above the amount of provisioning will be absorbed by capital. So capital requirement is one of the mechanism to check moral hazard in banking, because as we know that the use of leverage funding can bring about aggressive and irresponsible lending, because the bank saw that a huge amount of the loan are not funded by their own money, but these are funded by depositors' money. So likewise for Islamic banking, when the Islamic bank tries to use the real sector contract, such as real sale, real lease, mudarabah, musyarakah, salam istisna, they will not be able to do it, because this contract by default are highly risky, and thus will trigger high capital requirement, which the Islamic bank will not be able to sustain, because because they don't have that capacity to absorb the risk. And at the end of the day, we can see that the Islamic bank are left with no option but to use legal devices or hila to circumvent riba by using products such as Bay al-Ina in Malaysia and Tawarruk in many countries, in Malaysia, in the Middle East. The use of mala faida murabaha. So this is also another application of murabaha in places that are not using Tawarruk, such as Indonesia and Pakistan, in Africa, and in some of the Arab countries that rejected Tawarruk. They will use murabaha, but these are mala faida murabaha. So meaning that the murabaha conducted are not the real murabaha. There is no real sale taking place, in the banking system. The bank do not buy the property from the developer and sell the property to the customer, or the bank will take over ownership of the property and assume ownership risk. This is not happening, and the murabaha are just on paper. And in that sense, this is not a good development. This is a big tragedy to the Islamic banking business, and it will pose a very great danger to the Islamic banking business under a default event, because of the so-called non-compliant nature of this mala faida murabaha, non-true sale murabaha. The same applies to the musyarakah mutanakisah with purchase undertaking, where the purchase undertaking is a contract that require the customer in the musyarakah mutanakisah scheme to buy back the share under a default event. So these are desperate measures taken by Islamic bank to run their business in view of the fact that they are not able to use real sector contract due to the high amount of capital required to support those risky contracts. So let us see here. There are 4 conclusions that we can gather from the leverage funding system in Islamic bank, and what will be the implication. Number one, leverage funding can expose the Islamic bank to huge withdrawal risk, like what we saw taking place in Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and First Republic. Right? Even though maybe the nature of the withdrawal may not be identical to those American banks, but there are possibility of that happening, and we can see this happening during the Asian financial crisis in 1997, when a huge amount of Islamic deposit migrated out of the Islamic banking system into the conventional banking system, because the Islamic bank were not able to give competitive deposit rates to the Islamic deposit relative to conventional banking. Okay. Number two, Islamic bank are not able to use real sector contract of Al-Bayn, because the funding of the funding system is coming from leveraging, and leveraging require the Islamic bank to hold capital against a risky asset, and real sector contract will bring about the use of risky contract, and thus we can see that the Islamic bank will not be able to utilize this dynamic and potent contract for economic development, because they have to fork up high amount of capital to support this risky exposure. So we do hope that the Islamic bank can resort to the investment account funding in order to see, or in order to fly this real sector contract under the pretext of Al-Bayn. Number three, Islamic banking resorted to use legal devices because they couldn't use real sector contract, so there is no other way to continue the business but to resort to legal devices. But these legal devices work to suppress the market forces, that defy market demand and supply, that ends up making the Islamic banking product resembling riba product offered by conventional bank. So doing so can expose Islamic bank to Sharia non-compliant risk, as they are engaged in sale without the assumption of ownership risk. So as I have said earlier, ownership risk were cancelled. It will cancel because of the fact that if the price is to follow, if the MSA price is to follow market prices, then the Tawarruk will not be able to realize their objective. And therefore, they have to somehow defy market pricing, and that will somehow trigger some form of Sharia non-compliant risk to the bank. And number four, Islamic bank can also get into trouble under the Consumer Financial Protection Law when contentious Islamic products are offered without control. So there are so many mala faida, murabaha, musyarakah mutanakisa, tawarruk. These are contentious Islamic products that are offered without control. There is no, auditor or any kind of third-party agency to control the use of this contentious product. And at the end of the day, the consumer will not be getting the banking product that are claimed to be based on Islamic law. So the Islamic bank, they can be in danger because they are not properly offering the product. And if the products are found to be non-compliant, then the consumer can easily litigate the bank, for not providing them with the true label that was claimed to be when the Islamic bank started their business. Okay, Bras. Okay, we can discuss this further, inshallah. Please don't forget to comment and to subscribe. I will see you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Thank you.